I saw the island first about 1940 when I was in Dunedin with my mother and younger brother. Granny lived in Dunedin and she was poorly at the time, so Mum often came to Dunedin, and on this occasion she brought Rutherford, my brother, and me with her. And as a special treat, we went down by train to Port Chalmers, across in the little ferry, the Elsie Evans, to Portobello, and back up the Portobello Road by bus, and looking across to the island. I thought that'd be a lovely place to live. I didn't know anything about wind and weather and boats and tides and all the rest. I just liked the look of it. But it was 1961 before I set foot on the island. It was for a camp organised between Knox Church Youth Group and the University Student Christian Movement. And I thought then that the island was a great place. So I remember going up onto the ridge of the island, and as we passed some of the old quarantine buildings that have been demolished since then, Dean Walter Hurst from St Paul's Cathedral was leading the group, and I asked about the history, but the Dean was much keener to talk about the prospects ahead of this fledgling new community. So he didn't want to talk about the history at all. He thought it was sad and forgettable. And I didn't consider that any piece of history was all that forgettable. So nobody else seemed to be looking into the matter of the history, so I did that. And I remember for a camp in 1963, that was the 100th anniversary of the first use of the island for quarantine in July 1863. And so I couldn't agree with Dean Hurst about it being forgettable, and nobody else seemed to know much about the history, so I started to look into it. And the person who helped me most at first was Miss Margaret Pride of the Early Settlers Museum, Toitu as it is now. And I was working in the textbook department of Whitcomb and Tombs at the time, that's now Whitcools. And every lunchtime I would grab my sandwiches and be eating them as I ran down to the Settlers Museum, and Miss Pride would have ready for me the newspaper I wanted, and I was going through day by day the shipping lists on page 2, and so I knew what ships were quarantined, and then I started collecting up the information, because I would turn to that in that edition of the ODT and then follow it through until I found that the ship was quarantined no longer. So all that stuff I typed up as I went, and I've got folders and folders of stuff that's typed up. I don't need to keep my notebooks any longer because it's all been typed more legibly. So that was the first person who ever helped me, Margaret Pride, who was a calm, wise kind of person and good enough to have the newspapers ready for me every lunchtime so that I didn't waste any time. She was a dear. In fact, I pay tribute here to this In the book, I listed my acknowledgements and then said that it was attributed to my first encouragements to Winifred Bailey in Bangor, Northern Ireland, to Gwen Avery in Timaru, and to Margaret Pride of the Settlers Museum in Dunedin, and for Connie Urquhart, who always considered that solo writing was an antisocial activity, but who nevertheless has been a faithful friend and companion for 59 years. Well, the book grew out of that first interest in the history in about 1963, 4, 5, when I was researching. I don't have the books here. Sorry, they're downstairs, the folders that I have with my notes, because everything I found in a newspaper I copied out in longhand and then typed it up and then junked the notebooks in the end. So well, I would say it was a lot more than that, because you go from 1961, when I first went to the island, through to 2008 when this was published. Well, the mathematics of it, that's just on 50 something years, just plugging along steadily. And I didn't start writing from A to Z right through. I did bits here and bits there and bits somewhere else, and in the end just kind of linked it together. And a lot of the work was done while I was dog walking, because Connie, the friend who lived with me, had no patience with this. She thought that work such as sitting typing was terribly antisocial. And so I used to take the dog, a little Cairn Terrier we had, I would take him around the streets here or down to Anderson's Bay and walk him around on Bayfield Park. And I would be thinking out sentences in my head there, and when I got back home I'd jot down what I had been thinking, and there was a whole paragraph or two done. And then it was just a case of kind of linking them all together, the stack of bits of paper I had. So I don't know whether that's the approved way of writing a history, but certainly for me that was the way that made sense. I don't know, all sorts of things. I think the cemetery always draws me, maybe because I'm a lot older than all the other community members at the time. 89 and a half, if you want to put that down. And so the word mortality is kind of hanging around a bit more than for other members. And it's important, therefore, as with any older people, to get their memories written down somewhere. And this does have a lot of my own memories kind of woven into it. Yes, I did. Most of it could be done in Dunedin with back issues of the Otago Daily Times and the Otago Witness. The Witness particularly, because it was a weekly paper and it also had photographs long before the ODT had photographs. I had correspondence with Oxford University Press in Sydney and with National Archives in Wellington. It didn't hurt me to go to Wellington because I had a brother and his family there. So that was something I could do when I was in Wellington, or actually it was Lower Hutt, because National Archives were all stored at Lower Hutt in those days. And it meant I could take a whole day and go out there to the hut. And the men at National Archives, once they knew what I wanted, they were very good about having stuff ready for me, not wasting any time.
You've been very resilient, staying with the community through ups and downs over the years. Any comment?
One of the downs, nobody ever believes me. I won't stop now to get it, but remind me before you go. We were right down on our beam ends for petty cash one time. An electricity account had come for $25 and we did not have $25 spare in petty cash. The most they could rake up was $12, and I said, right, I'll pay the other $12 if I can have this little painting that's on the wall at the island. It was by H.V. Miller, who was a well-known Dunedin artist, and it's just cheaply painted on canvas. I'll go and get it. Not canvas, cardboard. I'll show you before you leave. And I paid $12 for that. I've no idea as an original how many hundred it might be now, but I like it, and I thought it was a fair bargain at the time. But that was how low we were. That's not counting money in the bank, it's just the money available as petty cash for sudden expenses. And in later years, people who were the treasurer could never believe such financial difficulties. But the community has always had bits and pieces. Now when we look at the balance sheets and we're talking about thousands and thousands, well, it sure never was like that at all. Somewhere round I've got a copy of the very first annual meeting, or the very first annual report. I had it with me at some stage to give to you, Kristen, and